What's going on, everyone? I'm back, and today, following the start of the NFL and fantasy season after that Thursday night showdown between the Falcons and the Eagles, I wanted to give you guys my reactions on the game because I did think there were some interesting takeaways. Now, specifically focusing on the fantasy side of things here, give you guys, like I said, my reaction and possibly address some overreactions that fantasy owners might be having, and quite possibly give you some overreactions of my own at the same time. So let's get right into it. Starting with the Atlanta Falcons, unfortunately they ended up losing 12-18 to the Eagles in a very similar fashion as to how they lost in the playoffs versus them, in that of multiple failed game-winning touchdown attempts at the goal line to Julio Jones. Now, when talking the Falcons, we have to start with the quarterback in Matt Ryan, because he was a guy that I said leading up to the start of fantasy that I thought you could get very good value for him later on in the draft, and because I identified him as someone that I saw having a bounce back year along with the entire Falcons offense, I said he can be a top 10 fantasy quarterback, along with a very nice addition in 2 quarterback leagues. As far as his stats go, 251 yards, 1 interception, 0 touchdowns, they didn't reflect that. But look, I'm not backing away from my prediction at all, because the fact of the matter is, the Falcons just played against a championship caliber defense in that of the Eagles on the road as well. They're not going to go ahead and play the Eagles defense every single week. And what Matt Ryan had, obviously it wasn't impressive as far as performances go, but for example, that 1 interception that he had, that very well could have been a touchdown because that was such an atypical Matt Ryan throw. I do understand he did get pressured, but look, that accuracy was non-existent on that throw because any one of us here could have made that interception. We didn't have to be a professional NFL DB to go ahead and get that pick. That's how bad of an interception it was. If it was even 50% of what Matt Ryan is capable of, that's a Julio Jones touchdown. That's a Matt Ryan touchdown. And same situation with the attempt on the last play of the game. Julio Jones make that catch. If he ends up staying in bounds, that's another touchdown. So again, I'm not too worried about Matt Ryan. I think the ceiling is still there. He just ended up having an unfortunate performance versus a very good defense that could have, on the basis of literally 1 or 2 plays, been very different. Now, moving on to the aforementioned Julio Jones, because look, what we saw in him is what we expected. He was a stud. He had 10 receptions for 169 yards, literally more than 50% of the yardage that Matt Ryan threw for, Julio Jones accounted for. And I'm also not even mentioning the fact that there was a point in the game where there was about a 40-yard pass that got ruled incomplete to Julio Jones, which was clearly a catch. He ended up bobbling it going to the ground, but then he had control. It never hit the ground, nothing like that. That should have been a catch, which would have put Julio over 200 yards receiving. That's crazy. Now, maybe you're saying to yourself, well, he didn't get any touchdowns, and I'm really worried about that. Is he going to be a disappointment similar to last year where he had good yardage, but didn't really produce touchdown-wise? And I'll say this, look, even if he puts together the exact same yardage and stats from last year in 2018, he's already going to be better value-wise, because last year he was getting drafted as an early first-round pick towards the middle of the first round. Now, this year he slipped, whether it's because a lot of people wanted to go ahead and target the running back position or because of recency bias, whatever it is, he slipped towards the end of the first round, sometimes even the start of the second round, which, again, if you compare selecting him 6th overall or 7th overall in the first round last year to now maybe 12th or 13th overall in 2018, that's better value, so automatically puts you in a better situation with Julio Jones. And even with that point being made, I don't think those struggles with the touchdowns are going to continue in 2018. Look, he had plenty of opportunities, and all those points that I made about Matt Ryan specifically apply to Julio Jones because that's who he was targeting on those potential touchdowns. And look, we saw, as always, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones have that connection. For everyone that was worried maybe the contract situation with Julio and the Falcons is going to negatively impact what he might or might not do, he was pretty much the 1A and 1B option for the Falcons, and that's going to continue on moving forward. Now, lastly, when talking the Falcons, let's discuss Devonta Freeman a little bit because, again, Freeman was a guy that I said I think could have some really nice value where he's going towards the end of the second round. And the reality is he got 6 rushes for 36 yards, and that was it. But he did get a little dinged up. I'm not sure at what point in the game that injury occurred or where he started feeling a little bit off. However, Freeman did go ahead and say after the game that he anticipates being 100% for the Falcons next game. Nothing too serious. He'll be fine. So that does give me a little bit of comfort here. I will say, however, if Devonta Freeman does continue to have some of these nick-ups and things like that, Tavon Coleman is a very good backup, one of the best backups in the NFL. He took over for Devonta Freeman, even though his yardage was unimpressive with 19 yards on 9 rushes, he still did get into the red zone. And it's not like I'm panicking or anything like that when it comes to Devonta Freeman. Maybe I'm just kind of starting to raise an eyebrow and labeling him as a guy to keep my eye on. That's how I'll phrase that situation. But again, my takeaway for this entire Falcons performance is, all things considered, it's kind of what I expected, to be honest with you, because I knew the Philadelphia defense is a good one. It was a road game for the Falcons, so that's a very different environment. And I didn't necessarily expect the highest scoring game here. I did think it would probably come down to one of the last plays in the game, which again it did. And the fact of the matter is, the biggest point here and takeaway is Falcons aren't going to play the Eagles defense every single week, week in and week out. All these guys will have their time to shine. But enough of that. Let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, who I think are actually the more interesting side in terms of fantasy performances. Starting with Zach Ertz, probably the highest drafted Philadelphia Eagle in your leagues, right around the start of the 3rd round most likely. He finished with 5 receptions for 48 yards, which doesn't reflect where a lot of us thought he would finish the season as a top 4 tight end. But look, don't freak out about it, because what the stats don't tell you is Zach Ertz still finished with 10 targets in a game where he got going relatively late. So that's definitely a positive here. On top of that, Nick Foles was the one throwing him the football. And for everyone there, I'm not trying to hate on Nick Foles. It's just a matter of fact that Carson Wentz is a better quarterback, especially a better passing quarterback. And once he returns, which I think will be right around week 3, week 4, we're going to see an improvement in that entire passing attack for the Eagles. On top of that, I haven't even mentioned Alshon Jeffrey, who I think once he returns, he'll be able to free up some things for Zach Ertz, who, in my opinion, is the best pass catcher for the Eagles, which again will prove to be an advantage for Ertz. But enough with Ertz. Let's focus in on the guy that I think for sure had the best night fantasy-wise in Ajayi. And the guy that I could probably spend an hour talking about, but I'm going to keep it brief because, look, he had 15 carries for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns, right around 18 points in fantasy, just based on those rushing stats. And, if you had him, you should definitely be happy with that performance. That's a good performance. The question is it going to be sustainable? Well, kind of going deeper into these stats, Ajayi had 15 carries, and just comparing him in terms of those carries to Clement and to Sproles, because those are going to be the main 3 guys for the Philadelphia Eagles. 15 carries is what he had. Those other 2 guys had 5 each, so that was a total of 25 carries, and that comes out to 60% of the carries in the rushing game is what Ajayi accounted for. To me, that's not high enough for a guy that some people drafted as a running back number 1. And let's be honest, those 18 points, 12 of them came from those 2 touchdowns, where one of them was about a 1-2 yard touchdown run, and the other was a little bit more of an impressive 11-yard touchdown run in the red zone. So if you take away, okay, not both of them, but one of them, that's a 12-point performance. And I don't think that's the best kind of expectation for a guy that many people are hoping to be their running back number 1. what I'm going to go ahead and say here, look, he definitely had a good performance on paper, and he had his value boosted after last night. I see this very similarly to what Mike Gillislee did for the Patriots in Week 1. A lot of people drafted him in 2017, probably around the 4th round, somewhere over there. And after that first game, man, his value went through the roof. People were loving him. People were starting him the week afterwards. And, you know, he maybe had a couple of solid performances after that, but for the most part, he faded away later on in the season. And unfortunately, if I had to put my money on it, that's what I think is going to happen with Ajayi. Or at least he won't continue the production he had in Week 1. Look, he's just way too touchdown dependent. I think yesterday was a perfect example of that. And my advice, honestly, since his value is probably never going to be higher than it is right now, and so many people want to make, these snap decisions, especially in terms of trades at the running back position, if you can get a decent trade offer for Ajayi, go ahead and trade him. Honestly, trade him and get a guy that maybe a Joe Mixon. People are worried about the Cincinnati offense. I think Mixon has a much higher ceiling than Ajayi. If you can get Mixon for Ajayi, that's a win. Maybe a guy in Jordan Howard. As much as I'm not high on the Bears offense, I do like Howard because he is independent from Mitch Trubisky for the most part, and he doesn't have to share the backfield as much as Ajayi does. Even a guy in Devonta Freeman who struggled in this game and got nicked up, I think he's a better option than Ajayi as well. So keep all those things in mind. Maybe you want to make some magic happen and try an Ajayi for a Le'Veon Bell trade if you're feeling lucky and think Bell comes back early, which, again, I am in that camp. You could probably make that trade happen after the performance Ajayi had. So basically what I'm trying to say is sell high on Ajayi right now. I don't think you're going to regret it. And if you can get some really good talent, doesn't necessarily have to be at the running back position, maybe it's the wide receiver position, capitalize on it while you can, because I don't think this performance is sustainable. But that pretty much wraps up the observations that I had from last night. So make sure to let me know what you guys thought. I'd be very interested to hear your opinion on the game and maybe some of your overreactions compared to mine. How you feel about Ajayi. Feel free to tell me why I'm wrong or why I'm right. Let me hear it in the comments section. And as always, if you guys enjoyed, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in future videos.